Hey guys, I'm FatBuddyCat, and this is a mini dirt track racer. Today, we're going to install the brake rotor on a 10-inch split rim. I've never done this before. I can see where it might be a little bit tricky, but at least we have a little bit of help from my friends at OMBWarehouse.com. And today, that comes by way of this new lightweight sprocket adapter. This is actually for the 6-inch wheels like you would find on a Doodlebug or a Coleman CT100U. That's okay because we're actually using a brake rotor from a Coleman CT100U, Megamoto, MM80, whatever. 6-inch wheel, that's the rotor you'd get. This adapter is going to allow us to attach this rotor to this hub. Your first inclination would be that the pretty side goes out. Your second would be that it has that offset to help line it up with the other hub. But it really doesn't. It might actually help us to put it on this way. What I'm looking at is the clearance of the caliper itself. We can get the rotor in there, but we're going to have bolts on this outside radius. No matter how I do it, it's either going to be bolt side out or nut side out. I actually think it's going to be skinnier going bolt side. But then, if we go this way, that little offset recovers some of the depth of that bolt head, and it pushes everything out away. I think that's the way to go, guys. I have 6 of these bolts and 6 nylock nuts. I'm going to get those on there and get right back to you. Now I stopped at 2. You see what I see? The space down here, I can barely get my finger in. Alright, so if we have to offset this rotor, we're going to need a bolt probably about that long. And I'm not going to be able to feed that down in and then back up through the hole. That means this whole billet adapter is going to have to come off. Since we have to recover something for the heads on these bolts anyway, it wouldn't hurt if we set these up like studs. I'm not sure if these are going to be long enough, but it's going to be close. I have some nuts, and I think I'm going to grab some washers too. I have another big idea here. It's pretty neat looking. All I did was use an oversized flange nut for a spacer instead of using a pile of washers. And then I just put another flange nut on that actually fits the threads. I think I can just tighten those down now. Trying to drop the rotor down on our studs, and it's not really working. A couple of the holes on this rotor might need a little touching up, so not a big deal. I'll drill those out real quick. This rotor was actually a lot more difficult to drill out than I thought it was going to be. Either that or I got to get some better bits. I took all 6 holes, one size bigger. I probably could have got away with a 3 pattern, but if you look up close, each hole is basically on the outside of a stud. So if it's a little this way or that way, it should still be square. I have 3 nuts on there, and if I try to hold that billet adapter and twist the rotor, I'm not getting anything out of it. I would like to see some more threads no matter what, so longer bolts is definitely a thing. If we take it over to the caliper itself and we put the rotor in between the pads, you can see right here is where the bolt will be coming through and going into the hub on the wheel. The head of that bolt is going to get really close to the bottom of that caliper. That means we have to increase the distance in between a little bit. I temporarily mounted the back wheel and found out that it's easier to remove the caliper than try to contend with all of this while feeding that spacer through and trying to get the rotor in between the pads on the caliper all at the same time. It's super awkward where I'm just running this factory caliper. It's 2 bolts and she's off of there. Oddly enough, we are super close to where we need to be. So I'm going to take those 2 bolts and mount this thing and see right where we're at before I go to the hardware store. Boy, am I glad I did this. Our rotor is in the caliper. We have to come out about a washer's width to get off of the inside pad there, but I think that's all we have to come out. I moved up to a 2-inch bolt for these studs. They're actually a 1/4 28 on the threads. I wonder if that rotor was metric. Oh well. This is going to work. What's not going to work is flush mounting our adapter to the hub. You see what I see? We have a big hole. When we put the axle and the spacer there, we still have a big hole. Water and dirt. They're going to get in there. They're going to make mud. It's going to cake up and there's no way for it to get out. That is going to wreak havoc on the bearing. I figured out which 4 holes are attaching the hub to the split rim, and I marked out in between them. I'm going to drill those out and create 4 drains. As I was drilling these holes out, I got to thinking, this is only for a brake rotor. This hub is not the weakest link. That adapter isn't going to come off of the hub, and that rotor isn't going to come off of the adapter. We have 4 bolts holding the hub to the split rim. If anything gives up, it's going to be that caliper. I'm going to drill 4 more holes, and I might make them a little bit bigger. Now those are drain holes. The bearing is the center of the rim. The most important part about installing the hub is keeping it centered on the rim. So, we have a hole in the middle of the hub, and we have this circle around the bearing. I'm trying to center this hole around that circle. As I tighten my nuts and bolts, I'm going around with my rubber mallet and giving it a tap if it gets out of line. Now that the hub is back on the rim, we can install our bolts on the adapter to create our studs. Get a load of this crowning achievement. All those studs are tight. I added a lock washer over the nut spacer. That way we're scooting the rotor over 1 more washer's width. And I added a couple on the back just to burn off a few threads. As I tighten the bolts that attach the adapter to the hub, I'm trying to keep it centered again. This time I'm working off of the outside radius of the hub, and I'm checking the overhang of the adapter. If any of them feel a little bit heavy, I give them a whack with the mallet and get them all close again before I give them the torque thunder. Couple more lock washers for the brake rotor. Why not? We have threads to spare. I already showed you this doesn't have far to go, but I'll do my best to eyeball it down the center as I tighten it anyway. I have the wheel back on the mini bike. I still can't get over how easy it is to get on without that caliper. Speaking of, that's the last thing to install. Think it's going to work? Well, it works. But I think we can get it just a little bit better. I just pulled the wheel, removed the rotor, and swapped one of those washers to the other side. We are now 2 washers closer to the caliper than we were on the original attempt. Wham, bam, blah, jam. We're spinning now, baby. I just hit the adjusters. This is a floating caliper, and we are just barely touching pads enough to move it. That's right where we want it. Everything else from here on out is going to be in the cable. But we 100% have a mechanical disc brake on these 10-inch wheels. If you enjoyed that little adventure, just wait and see what we're up against when we try to figure out where the sprocket goes. We're going to have to mock up the engine and the torque converter. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.